Good morning, students. We have completed the revision of life process chapter. We have discussed in-text questions, chapter and exercises, and some important questions also. Right, now let us discuss the next chapter of the present syllabus, that is, how do organisms reproduce. First, let us take NCERT in-text questions. What is the importance of DNA copying in reproduction? Right? DNA copying is the basic event of reproduction, and DNA contains the blueprint or information for body design in the organisms. So, if parents have to produce offspring, even offspring also should contain same DNA. So, if same information must be inherited from parents to offspring. If parental DNA is directly given to the offspring, then parental body design will be lost. Why? If parents are giving their DNA without having the DNA in their body. Hence, parents are giving their DNA. When parents are giving their DNA to children, they will be losing their DNA. Then if without DNA, their body design cannot be maintained. So, the body design will be lost by the parents. So, how this problem can be solved? So, without losing the information for maintaining the parental body design, the DNA can be transferred to the offspring only if a copy of DNA is made by using the parental DNA as template. So, parents can give their DNA, but not directly their DNA. The DNA will be made, duplicate copies, and the duplicate copy will be given to the offspring. Then only the DNA can be transferred to the offspring. The process of making a copy of DNA using parental DNA as a template is known as DNA copying. The process of making a copy of DNA using parental DNA as template. Template means information source to make the new one. Right? That is known as DNA copying. So, DNA copying process provides a copy of DNA for the body design of offspring from parents. Since a very less number of errors occur in the biochemical reactions of DNA copying mechanism, variations are created by DNA copying mechanism, and these variations are useful for the survival of species during the unfavorable conditions especially. So, no system or no process is 100% perfect. Even DNA copying mechanism also is not 100% perfect. Some errors are going to occur in the biochemical reactions of DNA copying mechanism, which result in the formation of certain variations in the new DNA copy. And these variations are helpful for the survival of species during the unfavorable conditions. Why is variation beneficial to the species but not necessarily for the individual? Means, just now we have discussed variations are formed by the errors in the biochemical reactions of DNA copying mechanism. And these variations are beneficial to the species especially, but not necessarily to the individual. How can you say? Just variations result due to the errors in the biochemical reactions of DNA copying mechanism. Same variation may have different effects in different individuals of the same species, because though all of the organisms of one species have similar body design, they do not have same body design. Why? Why the variation is going to show different effects in different individuals of the same species? Though all of the organisms of the same species or one species have similar body design, they do not have same body design. Means there are minor differences in their body design, and Because of these minor differences in their body design, the same variation will exhibit different effects in different organisms of the same species. So when or during a strong unfavorable condition, many organisms of species will die, but some organisms of the same species survive because of the same variation. Means the variations present in the organisms, they exhibit different effects in different organisms because of the minor differences in their body design. In some organisms, they exhibit very much favorable or beneficial effects. In some organisms, they may not be exhibiting the same favorable or beneficial effects. In those organisms where the variations can exhibit favorable or beneficial effects, such organisms can survive even in unfavorable conditions that are going to arise in their environment. In other organisms, as the variations may not be exhibiting the same beneficial effects, those organisms in unfavorable conditions may die, such that variation may not be beneficial necessarily to the individual organisms, but beneficial to the species survival. Even some organisms are surviving, all those organisms are belonging to the species. Okay, so the species is finally surviving. Individually, many organisms, they die, but as a whole, the species is able to survive in the unfavorable conditions because of the presence of what? Variations. So, variation may not be necessarily beneficial to the individual organisms, but it is beneficial to the species survival. In the textbook, some example is given like heat resistance variation is able to make the bacteria to survive. Okay, so there are some bacteria in particular environment which are living in normal conditions, and all of a sudden some heat wave has taken place in their environment. Many of the bacteria died due to that heat wave, but some bacteria which are having heat resistant variation could survive, right? These bacteria could survive because of their heat resistance variation, such that species is able to survive like that. But that explanation may not be suiting to this question. What is the question here? Why is variation beneficial to the species but not necessarily for the individual? Means same variation is present among the organisms of the, among different organisms of the same species. But out of this, many organisms died, but some organisms survived. So that species is surviving. What is the difference between the organisms that died and the organisms that could survive, which made the species to survive? The difference is the differential body design of those organisms. Their body designs are similar but not same. Means minor differences are there. Those minor differences, okay, some with the minor differences could able to utilize the variation effectively and could survive. Other organisms with other type of minor differences could not be able to utilize the variation, and so that in unfavorable condition could not survive. That is the reason variation may not be beneficial necessarily to the individual organisms, but it is useful for the survival of the species. How does binary fission differs from multiple fission? How does binary fission differs from multiple fission? Fission is the type of division by which a unicellular organism divides and form daughter cells or daughter organisms. So normally, if a cell is dividing and forming daughter cells, it is called normal cell division. But in the case of unicellular organisms, the division itself is making the daughter organisms. So that particular type of division that is making the daughter organisms is known as fission. biologically. So if the unicellular organism divides into two daughter cells or two daughter organisms by fission, then it is called binary fission. Like amoeba, paramecium, leishmania, and many bacteria, they divide by binary fission. In binary fission, nucleus of the parent cell, it divides to form two daughter cells. Two daughter nuclei. Coming to the multiple fission. If the unicellular organism divides into many small daughter organisms by fission, then it is called multiple fission. In the case of Plasmodium, it happens. In multiple fission, nucleus of the parent cell divides to form many daughter nuclei. Right? In some commercially published books, I don't want to name, it is given like yeast is undergoing multiple fission like that. It is wrong. It is wrong. Don't write yeast as example for multiple fission. It is only Plasmodium. Yeast, it exhibits a type of binary fission only, but the thing is, each cell that it divides and form two daughter cells. Okay, one daughter cell appears like a parent cell, the other daughter cell appears like a bud or smaller cell. So, the binary fission of the yeast, it is actually given the name as budding. But actually it is binary fission only, but it is little different from that of the normal binary fission. In Leishmania, Trypanosoma, like organisms, binary fission takes place, but in a specific orientation, because the cells are having some specific shape and some specific structures in order to divide that structure equally into two daughter organisms. In a specific orientation or in specific angle only, the binary fission should take place. In the case of the organisms like amoeba, the fission can take place, binary fission can take place in any plane of orientation. Whereas in the case of Leishmania, Trypanosoma like organisms, the specific structure, flagellum, okay, it necessitates that the organism should get divided in some particular or specific orientation only. Right. How will an organism be benefited if it reproduces through spores? Means some organisms reproduce through spores. Then how the organism will be getting benefited if it is reproducing through spores? Reproduction through spores, it is faster, especially faster mode of reproduction. So by spore formation method, the organism will be able to divide faster. Organism will be able to produce the offspring faster. And spores are generally light in weight, so they get dispersed very easily through air. Right? And the spores are generally covered with thick outer coverings, so they are protected more in unfavorable conditions. So especially in fungal spores, they are covered by chitin-made cell walls that offer more protection in unfavorable conditions. Until the spores are going to get the favorable conditions for the germination, the spores can withstand with many unfavorable conditions of the environment because of their thick outer coverings. Okay, such that the spore formation helps in the faster reproduction and easy dispersal and more protection from the outer pressures. Thank you.